Right now, somewhere outside, in weather cold enough to hurt your bare skin in minutes, there's a stray cat curled up under a porch, apparently fine. You've probably seen this yourself. A cat with no owner, no heated house, no coat, surviving nights that would put a human in the hospital. And that's led to a popular belief floating around online that stray cats basically can't die from cold, that they're somehow immune to it. That belief is wrong, and it's actually a little dangerous because cats absolutely do die from cold exposure every single winter. But the belief exists for a real reason. Stray cats have a genuinely remarkable set of biological and behavioral tools that let them survive conditions that look to us completely impossible. Understanding those tools tells you a lot about where cats actually came from, and it also tells you exactly where their limits are, which matters if you've ever wondered whether you should be helping the cat outside your window. Let's start with where this resilience comes from, because it's older than domestication itself. Every house cat and every stray on the planet descends from Felis libica, the African wildcat, an animal built for hot, dry desert environments in North Africa and the Middle East. That doesn't sound like cold weather training at all, and in a sense, it isn't. But desert environments have something in common with brutal winters, extreme temperature swings, scorching days and freezing nights, and unreliable food. Cats evolved as opportunists in an unforgiving environment, and that opportunism, more than any specific cold adaptation, is the trait that let them spread into freezing climates worldwide once they attached themselves to human settlements a few thousand years ago. In other words, cats didn't evolve to handle snow, they evolved to handle unpredictability, and cold is just one more unpredictable problem to solve. Once cats did spread into colder regions, real physical adaptations followed. The most visible one is the coat itself. As daylight hours shorten in autumn, a cat's body responds by growing a noticeably thicker winter coat, doubling down on both the outer guard hairs and the soft undercoat beneath them. That undercoat is doing the real work. It traps a layer of warm air directly against the skin, functioning less like a blanket and more like an insulated jacket. Long-haired breeds and cats that spend real time outdoors tend to develop this seasonal coat far more dramatically than pampered indoor cats whose bodies never get the environmental cue that a hard season is coming. But fur alone has a limit which researchers have actually measured directly. In laboratory studies on cold-adapted cats, when temperatures dropped to around 5 degrees below 0 Celsius, the insulating power of fur measurably weakened in every cat tested, adapted or not. What changed was what happened underneath the fur. Cats that had spent time acclimating to cold conditions showed their metabolism ramp up by around 45% compared to cats kept in warm environments, essentially cranking up their internal furnace to compensate for what the fur alone couldn't block. Cold-adapted cats also started reacting to dropping temperatures roughly 8 degrees earlier than non-adapted cats, meaning their bodies detected the cold sooner and began generating extra heat before the chill could take hold. This is a real, measurable biological adjustment, not just thicker hair. A cat that's lived outside through several winters is, on a cellular level, a genuinely different machine than a cat that just wandered outside for the first time. Then there's the part of a cat's anatomy doing constant invisible work, its circulatory system. Ears, paws, and tails are the most exposed, least insulated parts of a cat's body, and they're also the parts richest in something called countercurrent heat exchange. Blood vessels carrying warm blood out to the extremities run right alongside vessels carrying cooler blood back toward the core, and heat transfers directly between them before it ever reaches the coldest surface tissue. It's essentially a built-in radiator recycling system, keeping core body heat from being dumped uselessly into the freezing air through a paw or an ear tip. Cats can also restrict blood flow to their extremities entirely through vasoconstriction, prioritizing the organs that actually need to survive over the tissue that doesn't. Behavior does the rest, and this is where strays get genuinely clever. Cats are experts at reading a landscape most humans walk past without noticing. They tuck themselves under porches, into abandoned structures, beneath dense shrubs, or, notoriously, into the warm engine compartments of recently parked cars, all locations that block wind and retain some ambient heat. Multiple strays in the same territory will often abandon their usual solitary habits entirely and huddle together during hard cold snaps, sharing body heat in a way that meaningfully raises the temperature inside a shared shelter.
And when temperatures crash, cats instinctively conserve energy, moving less, hunting less, sitting tight rather than burning calories roaming, essentially rationing their own fuel supply until conditions improve. None of this is learned from a manual. It's instinct built up over the entire evolutionary history of a species that has always had to gamble carefully with limited resources. So that's the real explanation behind cats that look impossible to find in brutal weather. A thickened coat, a metabolism that can shift into a higher gear, a circulatory trick that protects the core at the expense of the extremities, and sharp behavioral instincts for finding shelter in cooling body heat. It's an impressive stack of adaptations. But it is not immunity, and this is the part that actually matters if you've seen a stray outside your home. There's also a visible breed-level version of this same story. Cats that evolved or were selectively bred in genuinely cold regions carry the adaptation further than the rest of the species. Maine Coons, developed in the harsh winters of the American Northeast, and British Shorthairs, bred in a cooler, damper climate, both carry noticeably denser coats and heavier body mass than the average short-haired stray, giving them more insulation and more thermal reserve to draw on before their systems start struggling. At the opposite extreme, hairless breeds like the Sphinx have essentially none of this built-in advantage and can struggle with cold even indoors at normal room temperature. Useful evidence that this resilience isn't a universal cat superpower. It's a specific, evolved trait, present in different amounts depending on ancestry, coat type, and body condition. This is also why community cat programs, run by volunteers in cold cities across North America and Europe, focus heavily on shelter rather than assuming colonies will manage on their own. Volunteers build small, insulated boxes lined with straw rather than blankets, since straw stays dry and traps air, while fabric absorbs moisture and freezes solid. They keep water from icing over and maintain steady feeding through the coldest months because instinct and biology can only stretch so far before a hard enough winter overwhelms them. Veterinary sources are consistent on where the real danger line sits. Once temperatures drop below about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 7 degrees Celsius, cats start moving into genuinely risky territory, and a cat's internal body temperature can begin sliding toward hypothermia, clinically defined as a body temperature below roughly 97.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Frostbite is a very real, well-documented injury in outdoor cats, and it targets exactly the extremities their circulatory trick is trying hardest to protect: ears, paws, and tails, when exposure runs too long or temperatures drop too far for the system to keep compensating. Kittens are especially vulnerable, since their bodies haven't built the metabolic and behavioral toolkit adult strays rely on. So are older cats, sick cats, and thin cats without enough fat reserve to fuel that metabolic spike.
Wet fur is catastrophic in the cold because soaked fur completely loses its insulating air pockets, which is exactly why rain or wet snow is often more dangerous to an outdoor cat than dry, bitter air. Every winter, animal shelters and rescue organizations issue the same warning for a reason. Stray and feral cats do die from exposure, and the ones who survive severe cold snaps are very often the ones who had reliable shelter, not the ones who were simply tougher, which is really the whole point buried underneath the myth. Cats aren't invincible against the cold. They're just extraordinarily good at buying themselves time and margin, stretching a dangerous night into a survivable one through fur, metabolism, circulation, and smart choices about where to hide and who to hide with. That's an entirely different thing from being immune. And the difference matters because it's exactly the gap that human intervention can close: an insulated shelter stuffed with dry straw, a steady food source that keeps their metabolic furnace fueled, and unfrozen water can be the difference between a stray cat's impressive natural toolkit being enough and it falling just short. So the next time you see a cat outside handling brutal cold like it's nothing, you're not looking at an animal that can't die from the weather. You're looking at millions of years of desert-born opportunism, repurposed generation after generation into a genuinely sophisticated survival system. It's remarkable. It's just not unlimited. And that's the part worth remembering the next time the temperature drops and there's a stray cat somewhere near.